Good morning. The late Rabbi Sachs once told a story about a young American that was studying in Japan, sitting in the afternoon in a train in Tokyo, and at one of the stations the doors open up and a man staggers in the carriage, clearly drunk, dirty, screaming. He began cursing people. He lunged at a woman that was holding a baby. The blow hit her, sent her into the lap of an elderly couple. They jumped up and ran to the other end of the carriage, and this really angered the drunk, who went after them, grabbing some metal pole, trying to wrench it out of its socket. It was a fraught and dangerous situation, and the young student who was watching this unfold before his eyes was readying himself for a fight. Before he could do so, there was a small elderly man, well over 70, who screamed at the man, "Hey, come here, talk to me." And the drunk said, "Like, why should I talk to you? What have you been drinking?" said the old man. He said, "I've been drinking sake, but really it's none of your business." The old man said, "Oh, that's wonderful. You see, I love sake too. Every night, myself and my wife, we warm up a little bottle of it, we take it out to the garden, we watch the sun go down, and we look to see how our persimmon trees are doing. You should know, my great-grandfather planted that tree." And as he began to speak, the drunk's face softened, his fists unclenched, and he said, "You know what? I love persimmon trees too." "Oh, I'm sure," said the old man. "You have a wonderful wife." He said, No, my wife died." And gently he began to sob. And he says, "I have no wife, I have no home, I have no job, I'm so ashamed of myself." And tears began rolling down his cheeks. As the train arrived at the student's stop, and he left the train, he hears and he sees this old man sighing. And he says, "Oh, this is a really difficult predicament. Sit down, tell me about it." And the last glimpse he has as the train pulls out of the station, the drunk was sitting with his head on the shoulder of the old man as they sobbed together. What he had sought to achieve by muscle, the old man had achieved with kind words. I think this story illustrates the power of what we call empathy, of being able to see the world through somebody else's eyes, of entering into their heart, to their feelings, their emotions, and of acting in such a way to let them know that really they're understood, that we hear them, that they really matter. You know, our community, or Israel, and the wider community just came back from another J-Roots trip to Poland, which I was privileged to and humbled to be able to guide. The Holocaust, as we know, is really the story of the biblical Jews during the story of the Exodus. And the question is, in what way? There was a Paro back then, and there were Hebrew slaves, and there was a Moshe, and there was a splitting of the sea, and there was a 40-year struggle to get to the promised land. And that's the story of freedom. It's a particular story that happened to a particular people. But I think it has universal characteristics. And the universal characteristics of a way of saying that we have to now work to enhance human dignity, to enlarge human decency, to be able to teach the world of human equality, the majesty and the sacred beauty of every single human life, that everyone's created B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of Hashem. And I think more than that, it's a plea set on the ashes of millions. And that's why we are commanded to remember that we were slaves in Egypt, to make sure that other people are not enslaved. That's the charge of this generation. That is what we have been bequeathed by the incredible survivors as they leave the stage of world history. If there's one command above all others, one mitzvah above all others that speaks of the power and the significance of empathy, it's the pasuk that appears in Perik Kaf Gimel of Shemot, "V'ger lo tilchatz, ve'atem yedatem et nefesh hager, ki gerim heitem be'eretz Yisrael." Don't oppress a stranger, for you know the heart of a stranger. You were strangers in the land of Egypt. As the war begins in Ukraine, we need to just do more than sympathize. It's not just about reading on our phones and saying "oi," or maybe looking at the headlines of a newspaper and say, "Oh, that's terrible." We need to empathize. I play several calls to those that I know that live in Kiev or in Zhytomyr or in Anatevka and other places in Ukraine. Jews who are so moved by a call that someone in Elstree cares about them. That plea of 80 years ago is screaming loud and clear. And I think we need to daven, we need to pray and do whatever we can, financially and actively, to help our family that are in the war zone, and thereby live the Jewish mantra of Noseh be'olim chavero, carrying the burden of our friends, making their problems our problems. May Hashem hear our collective tefillot and end the war soon with minimum casualties and very little devastation. Shabbat Shalom.